Okay, so I'm picking literally right where I left off. Let me get a drink of water, right? Mm. Whew, sure is hot in here. Okay, so we talked about, the detestable, right? We talked about that, the indignant. We have, we meet this character of Dr. Lanyon, and he is described as being boisterous and dapper, right? These are two more words that aren't so much in use. I think some of you might know dapper. Dapper simply means neat, well dressed, right? But when you're dapper and you're well dressed, that also means you're appropriate. Usually refer to a dapper gentleman, right? You don't normally, like, even if you say well dressed, it's something that's usually associated with something that's a little bit more high class, hoity toity. Boisterous refers to just being loud and cheerful, right? Boisterous, right, is, you can also even say, Mr. Hannigan, you'll like this. Do you know another word that can be used to describe the word boisterous? Now, I'm picking on you, Hannigan, for a reason. What, other than being loud and cheerful, what's another word for boisterous? Rowdy, exactly. Just short. Okay, so, right, that's boisterous. And we meet this friend, Dr. Lanyon, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well in a second. But you'll notice that we're dealing with a lot of upper class people at this point. We noticed that when we talked about Utterson going up and doing the reading of the divinity, like which he didn't do this Sunday because he goes up to look at Jekyll's will. And Jekyll's will, which is handwritten by the author himself, what's that called? Who am I going to pick on? Let's pick someone I haven't picked yet. Who's someone who I haven't picked yet? Mr. Keck. What is that word for something a person handwrote themselves? That is correct. It is a holograph. Missed. So, yes, instead of doing that, but it talks about how he went up there as soon as they, quote unquote, took the cloth away. One of the things that we've noticed, like when he goes and meets the genial means warm and friendly. When he goes and meets the genial Dr. Lanyon, right? Lanyon is a medical doctor, right? That is Jekyll's other's oldest friend, right? You'll notice he was led in by a servant. Before Utterson, right, goes to his study, when someone said someone took the cloth away, that refers to the tablecloth. Someone came to his dinner, which was made for him, and literally when he was done, took away the plates and even took away the tablecloth to make sure that it was clean. So one of the things that we're seeing with this took the cloth away and the presence of servants everywhere you go is so far all of the main characters that we have encountered have all been from the upper classes, right? Took the cloth away refers to a tablecloth. And even though it doesn't mention that Utterson has servants, he's not setting his own table and taking away his own tablecloth to wash it. He's going and doing other things. Otherwise, it would be talking about him setting the table and having to do all these other things. So there's already this theme of insulation from the upper class, right? We're noticing that we see a lot of different kinds of class things in some of the terminology that's being used. One more term that's used, right? Lanyon talks about Dr. Jekyll's scientific views as balderdash, right? Balderdash is the best way I can give a translation to balderdash is to simply say BS, right? It's not a word that you say lightly, right? It's not you're like, oh, that's fanciful or that's silly. It's balderdash, right? It's a very dismissive word. In modern English, if you were to translate Jekyll and Hyde into modern parlance, the closest word to it is to say BS or bull, right? So when he says it's balderdash, right, it's a very dismissive and very, that's another one of those important terms. Another term was used in the earlier chapter, used again, is this term juggernaut. That's actually a term from, I believe it is from Hinduist mythology. A juggernaut is a person who's an unstoppable force, right? That's why it's using that example, this juggernaut, this unstoppable force trampling the girl, right? That's this, some of these other more unfamiliar terms, right? So so those are some of the kind of words and terms that you might have not have been familiar with in the text. But there are some other references that are in this story that become more important in terms of framing the greater narrative. There are actually a couple of classical references within the text that are very, very important to talk about. When Utterson has his dream, remember Gabriel Utterson, Dr. Jekyll's lawyer, he has his dream, and he dreams about Hyde going through the streets, and he refers to the streets as being like a labyrinth or labyrinthian, right? Now, the term labyrinth, right, is, when used in just a regular context, a labyrinth is a maze, right? But even though he's just referring to a maze or a sinister maze, like that's the kind of idea of a labyrinth. A labyrinth is not a maze that's designed to be fun. It's designed to keep you in. It's designed to make it to confuse you and disorient you and make it hard to get out. And the labyrinth is one of those mythological references. And it's a mythological reference that becomes very, very important for the subtext of the novel. So can anyone, first of all, tell me, right, where the legendary labyrinth was? Does anyone know mythology well enough to know about the legendary labyrinth? Mr. Zielinski, you like studying old things. Sometimes you like history. Do you know where the labyrinth supposedly was in legend? That is correct, Patrick. It was on Crete. Yes, missed again. And can anyone tell me what the labyrinth was supposed to hold? Like, it was actually meant to hold something in. It kept something prisoner. Can anyone tell me what that was? Okay, let me see. Who seems to like mythology and like fairy tale creatures? I'm thinking Ritter, reading about like mummies come to life, and Izzy, who seems to like mythology. But let me pick on someone who doesn't volunteer as much. Who thinks they might like fantastic creatures? Who shall I pick? I will pick on you, Eric Pollard. Do you know what creature was at the center of the labyrinth? Yes, it's the Minotaur. Yes, actually went in. The Minotaur, which was a man with the head of a bull, right? It was a cursed demigod, right? Half man, half bull. And it was called the Minotaur, tar, because like it's like a centaur, right? But Minotaur, right? Because it was also, I believe, the son of Minos of Crete, right? And that becomes a really, really important classical reference when related to Jekyll and Hyde. Now, the builder of the Minotaur, if you didn't know, I don't have any half dollars in my pocket right now. I'll have to get them variously around my room. There's only one in the bucket. But the builder of the Minotaur was Daedalus. I actually don't know if that's spelled correctly. When I give you the list of terms, I'll make sure Daedalus is spelled correctly. And Daedalus had a son named Icarus, right? Now, the important part of the story, the story of the labyrinth, there was a very famous hero who slayed the Minotaur. I can't really think of his name off the top of my head. I know it's not Perseus, because Perseus slayed Medusa. So I'm actually having difficulty remembering who the hero was who slayed the Minotaur. The reason why he was able to go in and out is because this princess gave him golden thread, and he used that thread to be able to find his way out once he was able to get in. But the labyrinthian maze, right? It was so complex that Daedalus, and by the way, the maze is designed to draw you toward the center, so it's easy to get lost and get all the way to the center where the Minotaur is. But the thing that it's much harder to do is get out, because the walls and everything is designed to disorient you, right? Daedalus, in order to get out of the Minotaur maze, using wax and feathers, he actually built wings for himself and his son Icarus. Icarus is much more famous, the son of Daedalus, but all Icarus does is he, like an idiot, he ignores his father's warning, he flies too close to the sun, and because he flies too close to the sun, his the wax in his wings melt, they come apart, and he plummets to the earth and he dies, right? So basically, right, Daedalus, who builds the labyrinth to house the Minotaur, in order to be able to escape his own construction, he has to build wings to get out. And we're going to actually explore the meaning of this mythology more later in the lecture. Okay. The other classical reference, and this may or may not actually be real. Like, so we know that the Minotaur is a myth, right? But this other story that's mentioned is about Damon and Pythias, right? And Damon and Pythias is a story of two friends. And the story is most famously recorded in this Roman philosopher by the name of Cicero, Marcus Tullius Cicero. And Cicero lived in the time of Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar. He was a famous Roman orator, and he was a person of great morals. And if you read Dante's Inferno, actually, if you read the Divine Comedy, which includes Inferno, Paradiso, or Purgatorio and Paradiso, Cicero is actually one of the righteous pagans who they put in heaven, I believe. He might be, I think maybe he's in purgatory, but I don't believe so. I believe he's actually in heaven. He's one of the righteous people, righteous pagans in heaven or in purgatory. Anyway, the story of Damon and Pythias, and I don't remember which friend is which. One of them is tried and condemned to death, right? But the point is that before he dies, before he faces execution, he wants to travel and go home for a few days in order to set his affairs in order. And the king's like, "Are you mad? I can't let you leave. If you leave, you'll never come back. You're under a death sentence." So one of the friends, I don't remember if it was Damon or Pythias, offers himself as bail for his friend. He says, "I will offer myself as bail," meaning I'm the collateral, right? Because if you pay bail, so they let you out of prison before you face your trial. And if you jump bail, if you don't come back, then they keep your money, right? That's the whole point. So one of the friends offers himself as collateral, knowing that if his friend does not come back, instead of his friend being put to death, he will be put to death in his stead. And the legend is the friend actually comes back, right, to knowing he will be executed to save his friend. And the king, who's actually a tyrant, he is so impressed by the depth of their friendship that he actually releases both men. So this classical image of these two friends, right? The idea is there's this theme of friends sacrificing for one another. One willing to die so that the other might live, right? And they do it for each other, right? It doesn't matter who you are in the story. Damon, right, offers his life for Pythias and vice versa, right? Knowing that they face death for the other, right? That's the other kind of mythological underpinning story that's mentioned in this, okay? Now, all of that might seem, right, okay, so those are some interesting things, Mr. Tui, you might be thinking, but what the hell do they have to do with this story, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? And I am going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you in great detail to the point where you are absolutely sick of hearing about all this. So I'm going to stop the video here, and I'm going to gather together my $50, and then we will continue.